episode 15, Into the Still Force. And it's your boy Icon with some DC TV talking about a little Flash. So now, in this particular episode, because remember in the last episode, Iris was sitting at work, she was trying to get her work on, and then she disappeared while she was sitting in the chair. So it's the next day now. Barry wakes up the next day. He realizes that she's not there. He literally combs the entire city trying to find her, and he can't find her. He's talking to Cecile, he's talking to Chester, and he's just like, Iris disappeared. So now he's freaking out because he can't find his wife, rightfully so. Cecile had put the idea in his head. She said that the last time she disappeared was when the girl with the fading powers, whatever, that her and Sue was talking to. They said that, you know, she was the reason why she disappeared the first time. So Barry immediately runs down to Coast City to go speak to her. And this scene was completely useless. The girl served no purpose. And I feel like the only reason why the girl was even in the episode was just to remind us what happened to her mom. So Barry goes up to her. He's just like, hey, you know, Iris is missing again. And the first time she disappeared was because of you. And then he was like, you know, if we can understand how your powers work, we can maybe find Iris. And then she was just like, I'm not trying to find Iris. She was like, Iris made my mom disappear. And she lied to me about all this family nonsense and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, get out of my face. And then she gets mad. She walks away. So then at that point, after she walks away, and I feel like we're not going to be done with her, but like I said, like she just get on my nerves and I ain't see the point of having her in this episode. So, but when she leaves, then that's when Dion shows up, the returning Dion. And I thought that was weird because when Dion popped back up, I distinctly remember when he showed up and he was with Iris and he was with Sue and he put that little tracking particle into Iris's body, he then disappeared. So then when he shows back up again, I was just like, you know, I was a little shaky on that, but he says to Barry, we need to find Iris as quickly as possible. And you got to have Chester build some machine so we can track her in the Still Force. And then Barry's like, I thought you said going into the Still Force was a bad idea. And he was like, shut up, don't question me. He's like, let's just get in the Still Force. So Barry goes back to Team Flash. He talks to them about what Dion said. Joe, for some reason, has had the most dramatic change of character since the season started. In the Armageddon crossover, when they were talking about letting Eobard Thawne die so he can be officially wiped from existence, Joe cursed out Iris and Barry for that, and I thought that was weird. And then even here, when Barry told everybody about the plan to go into the Speed Force with Dion, Joe kind of like chased him down the hallway and like yelled at him again. I'm like, why are you yelling at people? And doesn't Joe still have like that time stone that Damien Dark gave? Like, when is that gonna come into play? Because Damien Dark literally gave him that stone and he said from one father to another, you're gonna need this when the time is right. And Joe hasn't even told Team Flash that he has the damn thing. But the stone is gonna come into play at some point before the season's over. So Joe warns him, he's just like, listen, are you sure you can trust Dion? And then Barry's like, yes, you know, because it's my fault that what happened to Dion happened to Dion and I should have tried harder. So then, you know, Joe was just like, oh, just be careful because, you know, it could be a setup. And then he's like, whatever. So Chester fixed the machine. Barry and Dion, they go into the Still Force. And now that they're in the Still Force, they're trying to find Iris. They're going around, you know, Dion's basically explaining to him. He's just like, you know, the way the Still Force works, it's the past, the present, and the future all merged into one. And then as they're, you know, then they use the device to try to track, you know, like Iris's signature. They track Iris, and now they're on the run looking for Iris. Surprise, surprise, Iris's signature existed in CC Media. So they go inside the CC Media building, and then that's when Barry bumped into the girl's mom, who Iris had made disappear. And then when Barry found her, she saw him, and then she was like, I don't know what's happening. Somebody please help me. And then he was just like, oh, he was like, you're such and such's mom. And then she was just like, yeah. And then the woman disappeared again. So now the woman is like fading. She's in the Still Force, thank goodness, but she's fading from like past, present, and future. And Barry actually said to Dion, he was like, yo, we got to save her because this poor woman's been trapped in here for 3 weeks. And then Dion got mad and like yelled at Barry. He was just like, oh, we got to keep going, man. He's like, Iris is all that matters right now and getting to Iris. And I was just like, well, that was a little emotional, like explosion. But Barry still hasn't forgotten that this woman's trapped up in the Still Force. And like I said, that's obviously going to come into play at some point later. So they find the particle. They finally find the particle, you know, that Iris had inside. And for some weird reason, although the tracking particle exists, Iris's body wasn't there. So then Barry was just like, okay, now that we got the particle, we can use it to track Iris. And then Dion snatches the particle and he's like, sorry, Barry, you know, you snooze, you lose. And then he takes the particle. And then Barry was like, what are you doing? We needed that to save Iris. And he was like, kick rocks, brother. And then he disappeared. Barry tried to grab him. But then when Barry tried to grab him, he went through Dion and ended up in his old house in the Still Force. And now he's trapped in a time loop where he can't leave his house. And I feel like because Dion has been affected by the time sickness, I feel like that's a corrupted, evil version of Dion from the future. because again, he did say past, present, and future, like they're basically all like all one. So that's either like an evil version of Dion or it's like a future evil version of Dion. And it just happened to be that way so he can get his hands on that particle. Because when Barry was trapped in the time loop, we then fast forward to 2049 where Nora's there, she's up in the loft and then she's typing up a report or whatever. Dion then comes to her only as still particles. And then he says to her, he's just like, oh, Barry needs your help. He needs you to save him. I can't save him, but only you can save him. And then the particles, like the Dion particles, zaps Nora into the still force. Obviously, that was the real Dion. That also says to me, because Barry even said at one point, because when Nora had showed up in the time loop, he was like, why would Dion send you to help me when he's the reason why I'm trapped in here? Because Nora actually met the real Dion, and the other person walking around is obviously an imposter. There was no Iris in this episode, by the way, and I'm not happy about that. So Nora and Barry are talking. Nora gives Barry one of the classic family hope speeches, and then that's when Barry, he figures out, he was just like, yeah, we're all connected, and because we're all connected, he said both Iris and I, we helped birth the forces, like the still force, the psych force, the strength force, the speed force. He said we birthed that. So there's a small part of each one that that resides within us. And then he said if I can tap into it, I can find Iris. So he tried to do Wally style, like he sat with his legs crossed. He tried to meditate, a la Wally West. And then even Nora said, she was like, you look just like Uncle Wally. But then after that, he couldn't tap into it. And then Nora had found the brush. And here's another callback to the Armageddon crossover, because when Team Flash was going to Paris to have like some dinner or whatever, Iris, when she came down looking fine with that dress on, she had taken the brush and she put the brush down on the couch, and then that's when the brush disappeared. And who would have thought that would end up becoming a thing? It actually became a thing later, because that same brush was in the still force. Nora gave it to Barry, and Barry used it to reconnect to the still force. And then when Barry connected to the still force, he was telling Nora, he was just like, yes, he's like, I can feel the power. He's like, I'm connected to everything. He's like, I can see everything. He's like, I see, he said, I see Jesse Quick, and like Harry Wells. He's like, I see, like Cisco and Caitlin. He's like, I see Bart's kids. He's like, I see your wife. And then he said, I also see Max. And I'm just like, okay, obviously that's a future speedster whose name he just dropped. His name is Max Lightning or something probably like that. But then after that, he was just like, okay, he gave Nora some of the still force power. And then the two of them basically ran through the city to try to get themselves out of the still force. And this was kind of cool, because when they tried to leave, they were trapped in a time loop to the point where the still force kept keeping them in the past. But Barry told Nora, he said, focus on the future. He said, focus on the future moment when we get out of here, because if your mom and I are alive in the future, and if you and Bart exist in the future, clearly you and I get out of here at some point. So focus on that moment. And it takes me back to Harry Potter, because in Harry Potter, in the third Harry Potter movie, The Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry summoned the Patronus charm, and he did expecto Patronum. And remember, like the first time he did the Patronus charm, the first time he saw the Patronus charm, he was across the lake and he saw somebody do the Patronus charm and he thought it was his dad. Later on, when he went into the future, and he became the person standing on the other side of the lake, he said to Hermione, he said he knew he could produce the Patronus charm in that moment, because when he was in the past, he already saw himself produce the charm. And it was the same thing with, same thing with Barry. Barry was like, I know you and I can get back to the future because we've already done it. We just have to, he's like, we just have to think about that moment. And it worked. They got themselves through and everything was fine again. But now, we're kind of back to square one. Nora goes back to the future just to make sure Iris is still there. And the fact that Iris is still there means that eventually Team Flash will figure out how to get her out of the still force. But for now, Barry was just like, he said I could feel Iris's presence when we were in there, because Iris's particles are probably like spread out through the entire still force. But he said he could feel Iris and he knows that he's safe. And for now, that's going to have to do. They even showed a picture of baby Jenna, because like we ain't see Joe and Cecile kid in a minute. So it was nice to see baby Jenna. And it'd be nice if somebody actually references her in the future too, because they never bring the baby up in the future. Now, for Chester P., Chester, because Flash was doing the whole still force thing, Chester got a call from the chief of police. And then when Kramer called him in, there was a device that blew up a building. It caused an explosion. But she said despite the fact that the device caused an explosion, all the people were evacuated out of the building before it got worse. And that's the part that everybody thought was weird. So when Chester looked at the device, he opened up the device, he was freaking out because he recognized the design, and the design of that device was the design of something that he himself had created. He's talking to Allegra, and then he's just like, oh, like, I'm the villain. He's like, you were right, Allegra, because remember Allegra told him, she was like, be putting your shit online because people are gonna steal your shit, and that's exactly what happened. So now he's freaking out, and then he was just like, I'm the bad guy. He's like, I'm the villain, and then it's like she had to kind of like calm him down. So he investigated the situation, and then after he did some investigating, he found out that the person actually used his designs to build a machine to try to provide clean energy to a shelter building or whatever. And because the equipment was kind of faulty, like it malfunctioned, and then that's when it blew up. But the person that tried to offer them that clean source of water and energy, they were the one that actually got everybody out of the building. So you can't really arrest somebody for that, because it's like, yeah, they caused the explosion, but they did it was an accident, and they did bring everybody to safety. So Chester got that cleared up, and then after he got that cleared up, he kind of felt better. He spoke to the person about, about making their designs better. Him and Allegra spoke, and then after that, Allegra and Chester went on their 19th date. And for two people who aren't a couple, they've gone on so many dates. Like, they've gone on so many dates at this point. It is ridiculous. I need them to like do something already. So then, so then they walked out. But this was interesting, when they walked out to go on their non-date, then somebody had accessed Chester's computer, and they literally downloaded all of his personal files. And who knows, they downloaded like Star Labs files as well. They got into his computer system. Now they took all the shit. So that's going to be a problem. And Chester's actually going to have something to do and address some stuff in the future. And speaking of Allegra, when Barry was in the Still Force and he was looking for Iris through Central City Media, he saw a moment in time in the future where Allegra was talking to the white girl that works at CC Media, the one that was like, I'm gonna bury you, bitch. And I said this like 2-3 episodes, that the girl is basically going to expose Allegra for being a metahuman. And the scene that the two of them had, that's exactly what happened. The girl was like, oh, the public needs to know who and what you are. And Allegra was like, oh, but it's my life, my choice. And that whole thing kept playing itself out. So like I said, at some point in the future, this girl is going to try to oust her as a metahuman because she said she was going to bury her, and she needs to make good on that promise. And then finally for Killer Frost, like nothing really happened for Killer Frost. Like she basically told Blaine to help her bring Frost back to life. Blaine was like, nah. And then Blaine came back later at the end of the episode, and he was like, fine, I'll help you. Now this is what pissed me off about all the Frost stuff. From a scientific standpoint, I can buy the fact that you can recreate the science experiment and recreate, like the DNA, because your dad did it. Like if your dad could create an experiment that can put Killer Frost inside of your body, there shouldn't be a problem for Caitlin herself to recreate the same experience. The part where she lost me, and I'm not even going to remember, I don't even remember the science words that she used, but she said to Blaine, it was something like, oh, I even built or borrowed a cryo-synthesizing body chamber or something so I can build her a new body. And I was like, see, that's some bullshit. Even if I believe that, first of all, that's just stupid. First of all, that's just not going to happen. Like the whole thing about you building her a new body, like organs and all. No, that's poppycock. I call like flag on the play. But for the sake of argument, if whatever magical sciencey mumbo jumbo you can come up with to build Killer Frost a new body, I swear to God, if they do this, because like I said before, Caitlin needs, when you bring Killer Frost back, she needs to be inside of Caitlin. The two of them need to go back to sharing a same body because that makes the most sense. If you are going to pull off some science crap to build her own body, she better not look like Caitlin. And because I can buy, like I said, I can buy that you can bring her back. For, in Fantasyland, I can be forced to believe you can build her a body. If she looks exactly like Caitlin, I'm going to blow my top. And thank you for tuning in. So we'll see what happens with this bullshit. I'm still in the camp of they never should have even told us that Caitlin was trying to bring her back until like episode 18 anyway. So I'm already annoyed over the fact that we knew about her plan too early. Like, if you're going to have an entire episode dedicated to having a funeral for this character, you don't then tell us in the same episode you're bringing the character back. And like I said, and also the whole thing about Killer Frost, like her mind, her mental, like her whereabouts. When Killer Frost was first brought to life, brought to consciousness, she was a straight up villain, and she was murdering a bunch of people, or at least attempting to murder a bunch of people. When she comes out, when Caitlin brings her back, she better not be like all nice. Like, we better get the original Killer Frost that we got from the beginning. So I'm like, this is like continuity, damn it. Like, just do something. But share your questions, your comments, and your concerns down below. Hit me up on Twitter and Instagram, always on YouTube, where you can share your questions, comments, and concerns about everything going on with the Flash. What do you think about where Iris is? What's going on with Dion? Is he good? Is he bad? What do you think about Caitlyn's ridiculous plan? And what do you think? Who do you think the person is that's broken into Chester's domain and stolen all of his wealth? Thanks for tuning in, guys. So until next time, for the Flash, as we get ourselves out of the Still Force. Until next week, I'm out this